Morning Tri-Cities. It's Friday night, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from Tridec. We've got a great webinar today with our Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative, which we've got all of our committee chairs and co-chairs and staff that works on MCEI. So let's see, let's just go through introductions, and I'm just going to start on my right and start with Chad Bartram, who's the chair of MCEI. Good morning, Chad.
Hi, Karl. Thanks for having us here today. Really appreciate it. So I am Chad Bartram. I am the current MCEI chair since April of 2020. Prior to being the chair, I was involved with MCEI for about 10 years. I have 35 years experience in the energy industry, having worked at both Energy Northwest and Benton PUD.
That's great. Thanks, Chad. Next up, I've got on my screen, just moving around, no random order, any random order, Jason Herbert, who is the co-chair of the Nuclear Subcommittee. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Karl. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Been here a couple times. Yeah. Nice to join you again. So
we it's still in the works. I don't know that we'll get to like a smoking jacket, but for people that have been in multiple times, there will be some type of recognition still in the works. So stay tuned.
A coffee mug would be great. I'm running out of ones to use on these. So
probably a really great suggestion.
Something eccentric, eclectic, that I can really use the next time I'm on would be ideal. So
there you go.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
You bet. George Montine works at PNL, and he is the chairman of our energy storage subcommittee. Good morning, George.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, Karl. And I've been with PNL 20 years now, and before that, I was with Cummins Engine Company for 16 years. So I'm excited to be here this morning to talk about energy and energy storage.
It's great to have you, George. Thanks. Diane Howard is the executive director of the Port of Benton, and she's also our co-chair for the Nuclear Subcommittee. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Karl. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to just be at this virtual table with my team of community collaborators and colleagues this morning. So look forward to the conversation.
It's going to be a good one. Thanks, Diane. Jennifer Harper is our chairperson of the Transportation Subcommittee. Good morning, Jennifer, and she works at Energy Northwest.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the project developer for Energy Northwest. I lead our transportation electrification initiatives. I've been participating in MCEI, I think, since 2016, and I'm looking forward to the conversation as well. Thanks.
Oh, that's awesome. David Riepblog is our vice president of federal programs, and David is the main staff support and keeps MCEI moving forward. Good morning, David.
Morning, everybody. Looking forward to the conversation. We've got a great group of people to talk about all the exciting things we have going on in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jason was talking about mugs, so I'll kick off our mug discussion quickly. And this is a mug that kind of came up, and I just received a few minutes ago. I don't know if you can read that or not, but when we had on the mayor, Lynn Lehman of Benton City, she talked about this really cool science display or community event that they were participating in with the Reach Museum. And it's essentially that the Reach Museum, I guess, is the sun, and then like different parts of the community are equidistant or to scale distances away from the sun. So ironically, Benton City is very proud because they made up their own mugs. They are Uranus, and I'm going to pronounce it that way and just go with it. And the mayor was nice enough to give me a mug, so I wanted to give a shout out to Benton City with this mug. Let's switch up the order and go to Jennifer. Do you have a mug or a coffee story you want to kick us off with this morning?
Well, I do. This coffee cup is just one of many stone coffee cups that I have that I actually sourced from Grand Central Coffee in Kennewick before they changed ownership. And so now I don't have a source for these mugs, but at one time I had too many to close the cupboard, so I started gifting them to other people. But I realized I'm down to about 4 of them now, if anybody else knows where to get them. Also, thanks for the great shout out to Benton City. I grew up in Benton City, so all the love is good. Thanks.
Oh, that's a great point. Anybody that wants to see the Uranus Memorial in Benton City, make sure you stop over in Benton City, and great partner of all of us and a great community for sure. Diane, how about you next? What do you have for a coffee mug or coffee story for us this morning?
I have the always classic and awesome Port of Benton mug. And then my daily go-to, just because I love the reflection of the Tri-Cities and the artwork on the Visit Tri-Cities mug. So if you know me, you know I drink a lot of coffee, so I need multiple mugs. All good.
That's great. George, how about you? What do you have for a mug for us this morning, or coffee story?
Well, I like to sip my coffee slowly over the course of the morning, and I use this hydro flask mug. Works fantastic. It allows me to keep a warm cup of coffee for a long time, and it's my wife and I, we split our time between here and Bend, and Hydro Flask is a Bend company, so supporting a local industry there. It's a great product. Maybe that sounded like a commercial, sorry.
No, I mean, obviously we're all in, to some degree in economic development, and Ben's really like a poster child for economic development. What they've been able to do with growing, especially the technology sector, but then great companies like Hydro Flask. So we sure don't mind giving them a shout out. Thanks. Okay, Jason, I know you don't have a Coffee with Karl mug, but what do you got for us?
Well, I just have my Roasters mug this morning, so nothing special. Like I said, I'm out of mugs at this point, and I went and looked in the cupboard. Nothing too good. I did have a Starbucks one, so I got that. But otherwise, I'm just looking forward to my Coffee with Karl mug that I'm going to get eventually.
That's
I'm hoping it has your face on it. That's what I'm looking for. So.
Well, ironically, when we put the on our website or on YouTube, there's usually like a screenshot with me doing some kind of funny face. So maybe you'll get one of those. Yeah.
Turn it into an avatar and put that on the mug. That'd be awesome.
Exactly. How about Chad? What do you got for a coffee mug for us?
Yeah, well, like Jennifer, I've got a group of mugs, and they all say United States Army on there. I purchased a whole bunch of them. Every morning I drink from a coffee cup with U.S. Army on it. I was served for 5.5 years, 1978 to 1984, so quite a long time ago. But in the Army, you really develop an affinity for coffee. I mean, you seriously do. Because, and by the way, don't count on sugar, don't count on cream, don't count on what Jason's got. You just have plain coffee, but it sure is enjoyable because oftentimes you go a few days without having anything hot.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Chad, thanks for your service. And that's I wasn't in the Army, but just camping, right? Like you wake up in the morning when it's cold. It's nice to have a cup of coffee when you're out in the woods.
It is.
And David, what do you have for a mug for us?
So maybe perhaps the only person who's been on Coffee with Karl more than me is maybe Jason. So my coffee cup stores were getting kind of low as well. I was kind of searching through the cabinets trying to think of something that would be relatable, and I was actually thinking of they have a Starbucks cup too, and I was thinking maybe that, because we're talking about MCEI as the clean energy hub of the Pacific Northwest, and you could say that Starbucks is maybe the coffee hub, or it started off as the coffee hub of the Pacific Northwest. But what I decided to go with was a mug that I got. It says, it's the Gandhi quote, "Be the change," because we see a need both in terms of public demand and also for our global climate to reduce carbon emissions. And we have the tools, I think, here in the Tri-Cities, and we're going to be talking about it today to help lead that change, so we in the Tri-Cities can be that change. So I thought that was a good
wow, deep thought. Topic. That's a lot of deep thought. Good job.
Yeah, and totally agree. And as the reward for deep thoughts, David, I'm going to ask you to kick us off on the history of the Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative, and kind of talk in general about it, and then we'll move to Chad to talk about from his experience and serve on MCEI, and then kind of where we're going, and then we'll go around to each committee and kind of get an update for there. So great words of wisdom. David kicks off on MCEI.
All right. And I'd invite, I know Diane and Chad were around the time of the formation of MCEI as well, so they might have some additional perspectives to share as well. But kind of to set the stage, a little over 10 years ago, the Department of Energy at that time, and on the Office of Environmental Management side, which is what the Hanford side is underneath, came up with the idea of clean energy parks at the cleanup sites across the country. We know at Hanford, the cleanup mission is going to continue for decades still, but at Hanford, but also at other sites across the country, folks are, in some respects, working themselves out of a job. And the goal was to help those communities transition from an economy that's largely driven by the cleanup mission from the Department of Energy to something else. And the workforce, and again, I'm sure we're going to talk about it throughout the morning, but the workforce at a lot of DOE sites, including at Hanford, is really well positioned to also do work in nuclear energy or advanced energy. We have a lot of scientists, engineers, very skilled craft labor force. And so when the Department of Energy came out with that idea, I think some very visionary predecessors of ours, and at least on the TRIDEC side, and again, some of the people who are on this webinar today, came up with the idea of creating the Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative, which was the Tri-Cities answer to that clean energy park concept. And again, to harness the capabilities that we have, I think, Karl, you put it well, that you can drive 30 minutes from the center of the Tri-Cities and touch just about every kind of clean energy generation that you can think of. And we have that skill set. We have the land, we have these opportunities. And so MCEI was formed. Mike Schwenk, who we've had on Coffee with Karl before, was the first chair, and he did a great job of kind of kicking things off. Mike Lawrence then became the chair, former Hanford manager and associate lab director at PNNL, and we had benefited from great leadership from both of them. A lot of credit goes to Gary Peterson, my predecessor, Tracy Zhao, who is still part of the TRIDEC team, who was really instrumental in making it happen, as well as Karl Adrian, of course, as well. And then even we got a lot of support from WRPS and other organizations and companies in the community. And so, although the administrations have changed and priorities have changed to some degree, we've continued with MCEI and really kind of working as a community amongst a wide variety of different organizations, from industry to public entities to PNL, utilities, and every organization you can think of to further kind of expand on our capabilities and opportunities for the community.
Well said, David. I think that's a great kickoff. Let's go to Chad next. And Chad, we talked a little bit leading up to coming online, that, as David said, you've been involved through your previous role at Benton PUD, and you want to tell us your perspective on MCEI, and then, as our chair, what are some of the directions that MCEI, and just kind of give us your thoughts on what's been done and what's yet to be done.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. First off, I would like to really give a shout out to David. David is the hub of this wheel here. He really keeps the main committee going, as well as all the subcommittees. And so, David, thank you very much for all that you've given, and the expertise that you bring in through legislation and just connections that you have. Yes, Karl mentioned that I was the former general manager of Benton PUD, and with that, I really valued. I tried to attend every single main MCEI meeting, and the value that we received was the ability for knowledge and information sharing. I mean, on the utility side, I mean, if you think of the electric utility industry, it is extremely complex. It starts with research and development, then it goes to generation, then it goes to transmission, and then it goes to distribution and delivery to the customer. But a lot of times those are different entities. Most of the time they're different entities. And so sometimes those at the load serving entity that was on my side of the spectrum didn't know what the other side was doing. And so what we were able to do by our attendance at MCEI is learn what PNNL was doing. And that was really helpful to us to kind of understand what are some technologies that are coming down the road that we might need to consider in our future planning. So with that, it was just a tremendous opportunity. So knowledge and information sharing. Networking, just understanding what people are doing in the community, it was really good in that respect. Now kind of switching off to what we're doing today. you know, we have the main MCEI, but our subcommittees is where the rubber meets the road. That's where the major initiatives are really happening. And this is just my perspective, and the subcommittee chairs may have different perspectives, but you know, the way I characterize it is we first look to opportunity. You know, first we want to be a catalyst to either attract or retain energy related businesses. And so that's our objective. And with that in mind, what we first look to is to local companies like PNNL, like Energy Northwest, or several others that may have an initiative that they're looking for some help with in launching that initiative. If we can kind of help round that out, they have their strategies. If we can do that, that's, I think, our number one goal. But also, we do have some initiatives that we start under the knowledge and information sharing. We try to bring in experts that teach us about something that maybe a local company isn't doing, but we think that may have an opportunity for some local company in the future to take those on. So I think that those are our goals and kind of the way we approach things. But again, it's our committee chairs, and I want to thank them again for all that they do, because they really do a really good job.
Thanks, Chad. I forgot to mention before, for those of us watching on the webinar, you can ask a question by using the question and answer feature at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching us on social media, you can ask your questions in the comment section, and we'll do our best to get to all those questions. We actually do have an initial question about when was MCEI formed, and we could have a jump ball, or I could go right to Diane, because I think Diane has the answer.
So I wanted to thank Chad for his comments, and also David as well for his history perspective. Also back in the, he was very polite not pointing out that I'm one of the older ones at the table here today on MCEI. So I also want to give credit to Keith Klein as well as Gary Peterson. Keith Klein at the time was representing TCLBA. And again, the vision that we saw, we knew that we needed to be ready. Economic development is not an instant answer. It takes a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnership, and a lot of conversations. And what Chad's outlined of what we've been doing, we were successful in a lot of grants along the way. Most significantly to the community was the transfer of the 1,641 acres of land. We've got tremendous partnership from labor. I want to shout out to Nick Bumpus and Randy Wally from Local 598. It is, at the end of the day, for us, was then and is now all about serving our community and serving the people that live here and growing forward. So just wanted to give that, that's why we kicked it off. Sure, at the very beginning, we weren't quite sure. There was some great grant collaboratives going forward, but it's turned into what you're gonna hear about today. And again, just wanna thank all of my co-chairs and collaborators and community partners for their ongoing support of this effort, because there's a lot of opportunity for this community.
Thanks, Diane. I think the MCEI started in 2009. Is that's what I had written down? Is that?
Yes. So yes, at the time, the research district was reformed from the Science and Technology Park in 6 and 7. We were established as a state innovation partnership zone. Then this opportunity came along, just as David described, from the Department of Energy. And we really needed a cornerstone. We knew that it was beyond just 1 or 2 entities. We needed a community lift. And this MCEI provided that opportunity to be the strong cornerstone, bringing the utilities into play as well as the workforce side of things was just a tremendous benefit. And number one, really learning about the industry and the industries that we have in the region was hugely helpful in driving things forward.
So let's go ahead and jump into those, look at the work of each committee, and we're going to start off with the Transportation Committee with Jennifer. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about the work of the Transportation Committee? And then, you know, when we talk about the role of MCEI and some of the things that have happened in the past, I think you had a great example from Lewis County, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us too.
Okay. So I'll start with one of the projects that the Transportation Subcommittee has completed, and that is the AVITA project, which is an acronym for Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Transportation Alliance, But in 2016, through an MCEI meeting, several utilities had discussed their interest in supporting electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the Mid-Columbia region. And at that time, there wasn't any fast chargers and few level 2 and lower voltage charging. And so we banded together several utilities in Energy Northwest to start looking for funding opportunities, and worked with MCEI and learned of a grant from the Washington State Department of Transportation, which ultimately resulted in a public-private partnership with a private entity, Green Lots, to install 9 DC fast charging stations on the eastern side of the state. And so there's actually, of those 9, there are, one Pasco, Richland, Kennewick, but also Connell, Prosser, and we have Yakima, Cle Elum, Ellensburg, and Moses Lake. And I hope I just said 9, but it was success, and it also helped us learn more about charging infrastructure and what the utility requirements and needs would be. And so currently we meet once a month, and we discuss funding opportunities that are pending. We have speakers come on and talk to us from Commerce, the Clean Cities Coalitions, the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. We pretty much discuss what the interest is of the group and try to find speakers that align with that. We have about, I want to say 10 to 15 organizations represented in the subcommittee. We have pretty good attendance regularly, and good conversations and questions, and we're able to connect each other with the right resources. Been really appreciative of the opportunity to have this kind of a committee, especially through MCEI with the energy focus. One of the other things, we have developed a small ad hoc committee out of the transportation subcommittee, which is focusing on hydrogen opportunities, both in production, storage, distribution, and transportation. And we're putting together a brief white paper so that we can be prepared if opportunities arise, which would highlight the Mid-Columbia's rich resources in that area. And so I've been working pretty closely with Diane on that. And so there'll be more to come from that. But then going on to your last question, we were contacted by some organizations in Lewis County that were interested in putting together a similar type of energy-focused alliance or collaboration between both private and public entities, utilities, transit agencies, some, commerce, economic development in Lewis County. And they're putting this together, and they asked if they could have the mission and vision statement from MCEI, and will likely participate as an observer in some of our meetings going forward as they're putting together their own coalition.
That's great. Thanks, Jennifer. And I really like that story, because I think it's, just talking a little bit about the history of MCEI and where we're going in the future, but really to kind of have our region be this pilot on, how do you form this collaborative? How do you bring the community together in so many different ways to get that forward vision and to get resources aligned, as Diane just said really well, for that next stage of energy. And obviously in Lewis County, they're transitioning away from the coal mine and the coal-fired power plant. And so it's a really great opportunity, I think, for all of us together to be able to help other communities that, are faced with that transition. That's a great story. Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I know that the MCEI group, because we named it in our application to the Department of Transportation, and we refer to it quite often when we're talking at the state level, that the there's an awareness that there is a strong group of organizations that can band together pretty quickly if there's interest for projects or information sharing on the state level as well.
That's perfect. I mean, Diane talked about getting grants and stuff, and that's obviously really key to be able to align that funding, and then again, be that kind of a mentor or a pilot for other communities that are doing that. Thanks. Let's go to George next and talk about well, George, and I appreciate your introduction where you had that experience at Cummins. I used to work at Caterpillar, so back then Caterpillar used to make truck engines, kind of a competitor, but not so much anymore. Hey, there you go. That's perfect. And then, which I think is awesome, right? Because in energy storage, Cummins actually, I think, bought a company that makes hydrolyzers that actually turn electricity into hydrogen. So can you give us kind of a general overview maybe of energy storage, George, and then, the work that you guys are doing on the subcommittee?
Sure. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, definitely. I feel like the newbie to this group. No offense, Diane, but I've only been probably less than 2 years, and our subcommittee is the most recent one that was stood up. It's been only less than 2 years, and I have the unfortunate experience of having had more virtual meetings than face-to-face meetings. So I'm really looking forward to when we can actually get back together. I feel like our subcommittee is a video game, but I think we're soon to get back together. But energy storage, from our work at PNNL, energy storage is a very exciting area right now. And when Mike Lawrence was first envisioning putting the subcommittee together, I think it was a very insightful decision on his point, because it's kind of a perfect storm out there right now. If you look at decarbonization, and Washington State is really very aggressive and very forward leaning in that, decarbonization is going to rely on intermittent renewable energy sources. And as Chad can attest, that's the only way you're going to make that successful in a reliable grid is through energy storage of some sort. And energy storage underpins that. And we look at grid scale energy storage particularly at the moment. And the other piece that's coming up is reliability. If you look at the things that have happened in California, grid reliability is also underpinned by energy storage technologies. And if you look at the transportation sector and what Jennifer's doing, if you all want affordable electric vehicles that have the range of a Tesla, but the price of a Yugo, that's going to be energy storage as well. And in the nuclear, we also look to the nuclear, because some of the technologies in nuclear, like molten salt, and the production of hydrogen with nuclear, also play into energy storage. So energy storage is a very, very important topic right now that underpins a whole bunch of activities. And when we stood up the subcommittee, one of the first activities we've done is to actually survey the landscape here. And we've done an invited seminar series, and we've looked at things like the Horn Rapids demo, the molten salt in the nuclear, pumped hydro. There's at least 3 projects going on here in the Northwest that are standing up, and some of the new proposed wind and solar projects also have energy storage components to it. Hydrogen, a lot of people don't recognize hydrogen as an energy storage technology, but that's really what it is. We don't go and harvest hydrogen. It's not something that we can just pull out of the air. Hydrogen is produced as an energy storage medium, and so it definitely falls in that purview. And then, of course, we look at the more traditional types of batteries, electrochemical types, flow batteries, and all that. And the other piece to this is the grid storage launch pad at PNNL. This was another driver for the subcommittee. PNNL has now launched the grid storage launch pad. It's actually in construction, should be completed here in another couple of years. And the mission there is to help promote this, the region as an industry magnet and have some outreach there. So our ultimate vision within the subcommittee is to look at all of these technologies, not just the electrochemical, not just the stuff that we're doing at the grid storage launchpad, but the whole spectrum of it, and try to create the Tri-Cities as a magnet for industry to come here. So we've done this seminar series. We've talked about all these great technologies, and now we're undertaking what's called a SWOT analysis. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, it's a very powerful technique we use. The SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And as you sort of lay out the landscape, we've now looked at all the different opportunities, and we're looking at things that might prohibit people from coming here as an industry magnet, so that we can recognize those and then address those and overcome those. And also look at our strengths. What is it that we have here in the Tri-Cities that can bring these energy storage companies in, and use those as talking points and as marketing points. And so we're very excited. We're very excited to get back together in person. And once we complete this SWOT, I think we're going to have a whole cadre of things that we're going to try to execute over the future here. And I just hope that we as a subcommittee have all the great successes that the transportation and the nuclear subcommittees have had. So they've set a very high bar for us, and we're gonna endeavor to live up to that. So I'll leave it at that for now, Karl.
That's great, George. Thanks. I appreciate the competitive nature, right? That we got this competition to deliver on so many of these exciting opportunities. That's a great perspective to have on it. Thanks, George. Let's go to nuclear, and we'll start with Jason, and then Diane, you can back clean up, as you always do an awesome job, and pulling everything back together. So let's go to Jason to kind of get that overview of the nuclear subcommittee, some of the stuff you guys are working on, and your perspective on it.
Well, I'm usually the Robin to Diane's Batman, so we're kind of switching up the order here a little bit. But I'll go first. I think for the Nuclear Energy and Technology Subcommittee, we have the opportunity, which comes with great responsibility, where we could have the first advanced reactor, maybe the first two, built here in the Central Washington region. But there's a lot more work that comes with it than just building a reactor and connecting it to the grid and having commercially available power. And so I think what we really focus on is really kind of being a hub and a convener of, what resources do we have? What resources do we need? What are our infrastructure capabilities? What expertise do we have from everyone from PNNL to engineering firms to Framatome? Advanced reactors are going to use different fuel than the existing fleet does. They'll use HALEU fuel, high assay, low enriched uranium. We don't have a domestic supply chain currently for that. So what role can we play in bringing that about, especially if we're going to have one of the first reactors here? And so I think we have to identify what we have locally. We've been putting together lists of suppliers, working with others in the community, but also really bringing in experts from Idaho National Lab around the country. I'm really excited about having Susie Baker from Fastest Path to Zero, who was with Third Way before, and coming out in July. So I think really just kind of being a place to figure out what we have to offer to support that end goal of developing advanced nuclear and really making sure that the Tri-Cities remains a leading clean energy hub in the Northwest region, and hopefully for the whole country before too long. So I'm sure I missed a lot. Diane, I'll leave it to you.
This is why Jason's just the best co-chair, because he understands my affinity for DC Comics, and I love the Marvel Comics Spider-Man reference. So we're high-fiving on that already. Also just want to compliment Energy Northwest. We've been talking about how the area has been growing and emerging. It's also DOE's investment, not only in Hanford in the lab, but also the recent ARDP projects. And Energy Northwest was a huge critical part of that. And the Tri-Energy Partnership, again, X Energy and Grant PUD. They really have us in a great place. And as I mentioned earlier, really leading to the next evolution. And so everything Jason said is spot on. We're taking action to ensure that we are lifting a new supply chain. This is a brand new supply chain. We don't know all of the elements of it yet. But again, thank our industry partners, thank the local businesses that have come to the table to support this effort. And we are really trying to serve a global market. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that X Energy is successful here because it will lead a pathway for others to follow. So very excited about that. And we are going to be forming and having conversations. Our committee is forming with industry an alliance. So the company alliance or industry alliance will be similar to one known as the STARS Alliance, or in the utility world, there's the USA Alliance, where there's a master agreement, and we've gone through the vetting process of certification of these companies, making sure that our local companies are at that table first. Growing our own is always the best play in economic development, but again, it leads to the pathways going forward to serve a global supply chain.
That was awesome.
High five, Jason, on the Batman comment. Way to go, Robin.
Thanks.
I think Jason might, yeah, we'll do a coffee with Karl mug, but I think he at least has a Robin mug coming.
I'll take it.
I'm liking that.
Well, let's get into a general discussion. I just want to kick it off maybe by saying, well, actually, I don't mean to forget about David, obviously, but David, anything else you can add to the conversation about the committees and the work that, I mean, you are, Chad did a great job of giving you that shout out that you're, our key staffer that works with all the committees and pulls it together. And then obviously your role in, leading our federal affairs, and Diane just talked about that connection from DOE in so many different ways, not only from cleanup to PNNL, but then also to ARDP. But anything to add to the conversation about the work the committees do?
I'll just say that I think one of the things that we've tried to be very mindful of is to really kind of focus. When you look at energy, there's just so many different things you can do in energy, and it's easy to get a little bit too dispersed. And so I think we've tried to be very mindful in working with Chad in his role as chair now, and previously with Mike Lawrence, in trying to identify subcommittees that have a niche that is a particular capability or opportunity for the Tri-City area. We know that PNNL is the absolute top energy storage lab in the country. It's such an asset to our community in so many different ways. And so it just made a lot of sense to establish this new energy storage subcommittee, and George has done a great job of leading that for us. Nuclear, we have this heritage of nuclear, and we've been a leader in new nuclear technologies dating back to the 40s. And we have this, again, some uniquely skilled workforces and capabilities. And again, that seems like it's a perfect match for our community. And then Jennifer and her I think it's a real passion for electric vehicles, and recognizing that we had the state legislature passed CETA a couple years ago. We've mentioned it before on Coffee with Karl, but where there's another big opportunity is in reducing carbon emissions in transportation, and whether that's through EVs, hydrogen fueled, biofuels, that's I think a big opportunity area. And so those conversations that Jennifer was mentioning, I think really help us identify where those opportunities are for the community. And I think Diane has put it well a number of times in the past that what we want to do is, in all of these different areas and perhaps more, is to position the Tri-Cities both to be ready for when opportunities come up, but also to be almost the no-brainer. Like if you're a company that's looking to develop or manufacture new battery technologies, or supply chain for advanced nuclear, or trial of new EV technologies, or whatever it might be, that why would we go anywhere else but the Tri-Cities? And so I think that's something we've been talking about more and more recently. And I think that's a really good direction for us to go in, and trying to communicate more with industry to find out what they need and how can we make the Tri-Cities be that best fit, that obvious choice for them.
Yeah, that's really well said. Let's kind of get into a general discussion, and we talked about this a little bit before, and it struck me. I don't know, maybe it's been about a month ago now, but David and I had a chance to meet with Bob Ferguson, who is a really well known, has worn so many hats in the local Tri-Cities and even nationwide energy field over the last like 60 or 70 years, I want to say. And Bob's obviously had a very long history with Tridec as well in leadership positions. But Bob was a manager of what the entity that Energy Northwest was before, known by the acronym of WHOOPS. And he came in not at the beginning, but sometime in the middle. And we talked about the WHOOPS initiative was public utility districts coming together to do more energy generation that was really focused on nuclear energy back in the 70s. But he talked about a study that was done in probably like late 60s, early 70s that said that the whole Pacific Northwest region was going to need terawatts. Is that the right word, Chad? Is that, I almost said terabytes. I'm like, it's not information, it's energy. Terawatts of power that was needed, so there was this forecast that industry was going to grow so much and that there's this huge need for electrical power. And that was the driver to start to plan out and start to build, I think, 4 nuclear reactors originally. But you kind of like fast forward now to 2021. And so 50 years later, when you look at some of these forecasts that are coming out, I know like Energy Northwest did the E3 study looking at future energy needs. Jason, you've talked about this before about as we take carbon out of our electrical generating system because of the CETA standard, there's going to be like 20% of our current electrical needs that need to be generated from carbon emitting sources. But then also we've got this rise in energy. A lot of these clean technologies that we're talking about take a lot more energy, lithium ion battery production takes a lot of energy. Growing crystals for solar cells takes a lot of electricity. And so it's almost like 50 years later, that original forecast has come back. But I think the kind of the story here for us and why I think MCEI has really lived this is that the Tri-Cities, because of our history and our experience with energy, starting off with the Manhattan Project, leading up to today, has all of these people, these resources, from labor to companies to research to deployment on the PUD side. The other big driver is obviously not just electrical demand, but also carbon free. And so it's almost like, what started in the 70s is now coming to fruition because of all of our local parties, because of what everybody represents here and the work of MCEI. To your point, I think we're really well positioned to take that next leap. And I don't know, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but does anybody have anything to add to that? I mean, I think it's, we're not trying to pat ourselves on the back. It's been a lot of hard work. And I think that, there's been, it's taken all of these other things that we don't necessarily have control over, like policy direction, although Jason might argue with that. Maybe there's been a lot of work behind the scenes on policy, but, to get to this point to where now we're really positioned well to continue the economic growth for our community because of all the work everybody's done together.
Yeah, Karl, that is a real great observation, and your recognition that things didn't happen the way they were planned back then. But MCEI did form, people had a vision, and I really want to thank all of those that had that vision, and to Mike Lawrence, who was my predecessor as chair, who for many years kept this thing going. The stars weren't aligned, but the way things go in life is they come back around again, and they certainly are back. I think we're in a much better position now statewide, but there are some real concerns. So you're talking about looming energy shortages. So that's one thing that's making what we're doing now significant. Just prior to this meeting, I went back and I reviewed the video from the Utilities and Transportation Committee for the state of Washington. They held their first annual Resource Adequacy Summit. Rick Dunn, one of our members and Benton PUD General Manager, was a speaker at that. And speaker after speaker came up and talked about looming energy shortages. And they range in their amount, but they're significant. And to your point, Karl, there's significant looming shortages, not including an increase in transportation use for the electric sector. So there are a lot of things coming around. And then, of course, as you mentioned, clean energy and the recognition that nuclear energy provides that clean energy, or is doing it today and can provide more of it. It's just created this opportunity for all of what our subcommittees are doing. It just seems like all of a sudden the activity, the opportunities have really picked up.
I think it also complements our community and the grit and determination. Bob Ferguson still has faith in this community. He still sees the assets, and his recent $500,000 endowment position to WSU Tri-Cities just reflects that. It's not only just talk, it's action. I think that during the Tri-Energy Partnership, Brad Swatsky said, if anyone's up to the task, it's us here in the Tri-Cities to make this happen. We have all the assets. We have the skilled and professional workforce, the great craftspeople. It's our opportunity to miss. And I think that you're hearing from this group, just as that community had those assets that maybe it didn't work out, but we're going to make lemonade out of the lemons that we've been given. But those lemons are tremendous assets. And we want to be able to move forward in a positive direction.
Jason, anything to add? I almost called you Robin, sorry.
Yeah, regret that one. No, I mean, there was a lot to touch on there. I do think, the energy shortage, especially like the capacity shortfalls that we're seeing in the future. I just got a question from a member of Congress who's going to be on a panel in a while and asked, are we on track to meet CETA by 2045? Do we have enough energy plan to come on to replace, so if you look at our energy portfolio from Energy Independence Administration or Energy Information Administration, Washington State's 80% clean. That's largely due to our abundance of hydro, 13% natural gas, 7% coal. So all that coal, whether it's generated here or imported from out of state, goes away in 2025. So not only are we not right now, do we not have the resources planned to get to 2045, pretty much by the late 2020s, 2030s, we're facing some pretty significant capacity shortfalls. And the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, they use loss of load probability. Chad can explain it better than I can, but essentially it's the chance that you're not going to have enough generation to meet demand. They like to keep that under 5% out to 2024, 2025. It starts jumping up into the 20s and even the early and low 30%. And so that just means that we're going to have a lot less reliability on the grid. So I'm trying to figure out how to answer, this question to him, but saying like, we can do it, but that work has to start now. And it's not one advanced reactor. It's not one resource that's going to do it, but everyone really needs to start planning for the future. And it's going to take a lot of hard work and investment to make sure that we're building out the resources we need, especially as you mentioned, every time we decarbonize another part of the economy, that increases the demands on the electric system. So since CETA passed, I think our load growth is just going to increase and increase, especially as we have more electric vehicles and the manufacturing sector gets decarbonized, and then that electricity has to come from somewhere and it has to come from clean resources. So we have a challenge ahead, but I think the comforting thing is that we can do it. We have the resources available. It's just going to take the grit that we have here in the Tri-Cities to get there.
I'd like to add too, just in terms of these energy shortages, and George had brought this up earlier. You are going to need storage. I mean, you're going to need that. You're going to need good, reliable energy production, particularly during the summer and the winter months. Jason referred to capacity, and that's what we're talking about. Are you producing power when you need it the most? But energy storage can really make things much easier, and we've watched California implement energy storage. It got off to a kind of a slow start. It was mandated by the state. But they have 4-hour energy storage, and that's good for them because they need it every day. When the sun goes down and all their solar production goes down, they need that 4-hour energy storage until demand starts to come down and people start going to bed and getting home from work and all that stuff. But here in the future, and this is what's exciting about what PNNL is doing here. I mean, they're taking the lead on this and trying to get that energy storage from a 4-hour duration to an 8 to 12-hour duration, and then have multiple batteries, so we can get through an Arctic Express. California doesn't get very many Arctic Expresses. but we do. And so we've got to be able to last for 5 to 7 days.
That's a great point. I was going to follow on with the question to George on energy storage, and Chad, you teed it up perfectly. You know, that I think a lot of the maybe past and current state of technology and energy storage is matching up with renewables, like you said, that, you know, California, where they have a lot of solar, to have that short duration energy storage. But George, where do you see energy storage going, to Chad's point about that longer duration? I know, you know, I've been on some of the subcommittee meetings. We talked about flow batteries and some other longer term capacity things, but are there other good uses for energy storage that would match up with other type of energy generation, carbon-free energy generation outside of, you know, just renewables? You know, what's your perspective on that? What do you think that we're going to see in the future?
Well, so the current state of the technology, you know, the vast majority of the energy storage being put in is really these lithium ion packs, and the current state of technology is, it's hard to see that that's ever really going to break much past that 4-hour mark that Chad's saying. A lot of that's going in, but there's a lot of issues around expanding that much past 4 hours. So one of the technologies that, so what you really need to do is you need to find some kind of an energy storage system where the energy is stored in some other form than in the electrodes, like in a lithium-ion battery. And flow battery is one option there, where you actually, the active material is in the electrolyte. And so the amount of energy that you can actually store is really only limited by the size of the tank of electrolyte that you have. So that's a very promising technology. We've done some demos with flow batteries here in Washington. You know, we've still got a lot of work to do, both on the engineering and some of the fundamental chemistry side before that's going to make it. But the other thing that's really an opportunity is things like hydrogen, and also other sources where when you create the energy, you're putting it into some sort of a chemical form where, again, the amount of energy is really dictated by the size of the tank. And you can store hydrogen in salt caverns, or if you actually take it all the way to some kind of liquid form like methanol or you know, maybe even ammonia. There's a lot of different ways of doing that longer term storage. But also pumped hydro, you know, one of the things that Washington, you know, we really have more experience with energy storage than probably any place in the world. You know, we've understood energy storage through our dams here for quite a long time. And, you know, we understand the limitations, and we understand the cyclic nature of the weather and the snowpack and all that. And, you know, there are some projects now being looked at with pumped hydro that are very promising. So you really need a portfolio of approaches there. And I think to Chad's point, to get past the 4 hours, I think we're going to need that next generation of technology. And, you know, unfortunately, these technologies develop slowly. We don't have a Moore's law with these things. So developing the new, you know, next electric vehicle or the next battery or the next technology, these are sort of 3 to 5% improvements per year. It's a slow march. And people need to recognize that. And I worry about some of these aggressive goals that people are putting out, and they don't match up with the reality of how these things take time. We'll get there, but it does take time, and we need to recognize that. Sorry for that long-winded answer, Carl. I probably took too much time there.
No, not at all. It's a great point, because I think that like in business development or economic development, a lot of times people think about developing technology on a model that's set up for software, right? Like, you know, you see the movie, or you think, hey, just get, you know, 5 guys with a computer, people with a computer in a room, and, you know, couple days later, they have this new software platform and you roll it out and it does whatever. And to your point, we're not talking about software. We're not talking about people writing code. We're actually talking about, number one, on in a lab space or on a bench space, kind of proving that this method works, and then working on some type of a pilot or prototype, and then commercializing it, and then going up to scale. And those are magnitudes of order different than creating code. And I think Jason had another example of it, right, where we're trying to take coal out of our electrical grid by 2025. The X Energy ARDP project is potentially, or the date for that's 2027. And so, these timelines that we have, we got to be realistic with them. We have to have an understanding of that, and we have to understand, why it's so important that the federal government funds R&D, in these areas, which obviously having P&L here is a huge resource and asset for our whole country, and especially for us locally. But that, you didn't go too deep. I think you gave a good example of, how things work, for sure, George. We are getting really short on time, but I did have one question I wanted to go back to Jennifer and have her have a chance. The question's about vehicle charging stations, and do we have an analysis or forecast on, locally in the Tri-Cities region, how many we would need for the future? And then, in the work that you guys do in the transportation subcommittee, Jennifer, I know the governor vetoed it, but we were going to not have internal combustion engine cars that we could buy within 10 years. So any forecasts on transition to electrical vehicles, and then what would that mean like locally in charging stations?
So to answer the first question, I haven't seen a specific forecast for what we need for charging stations specific to Tri-Cities. There has recently been an analysis tool developed from the University of Washington that takes a look at a lot of different factors, growth rate in EV registrations, the difference between the EV registrations and the internal combustion engine registrations, and then looks at what you would need as it goes forward. And so that has just been released, and I actually am participating in a training next week on how to use that tool. Originally, the Washington State Department of Transportation had a recommendation that fast chargers be located at least 45 miles apart on routes, just to get a start for the infrastructure, and then you can fill in later as the growth rate takes off. In 2017, I believe, there was a goal to reach 30,000 registered plug-in electric and plug-in hybrid in Washington by 2020. And that was met in September of 2020. And since then, we have about 70,000 or more just in the last year. And so it is growing throughout the state. Obviously, Tri-Cities, we don't have as many as you have along the I-5 corridor, but we're growing at the same rate. Since the Vita was installed, there's actually been more private investment in charging infrastructure in the Tri-Cities as well. I failed to mention that, but so there's more than just what the Avita project installed. And then as the last thing, that legislature was vetoed, but the language was included in another bill, 1287, not to have it as a mandate, but to have it as a goal. I think it's a pretty lofty goal by 2030, but it's still, we are seeing more models coming in, and the availability of models throughout the state, plus new like pickup trucks and SUVs. I think that is going to make a big difference in people's desire to look at electric vehicles in their lives.
Totally. And especially electric pickups locally, like we're definitely going to need those, right, in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah.
Well, we're basically out of time, so let's go around, and I just want to thank everybody for your time today. We could probably talk about this for 5 hours and still have, I think, an interesting conversation. So thanks everybody for joining us. Being kind of the new guy here, I'm still going to call myself that till somebody tells me no. Diane's not shaking her head, but I just want to thank all of you and all the committee members for MCEI. I mean, I think, coming into this, didn't really have an understanding of it, but as I spend more time here, it really, the work that you guys do is positioning us so well to take advantage of these opportunities, and really about being the leader for our community in across the energy spectrum. But then ultimately what we're all about, right? That's job creation and economic impact. So thank you all. But let's start with David. David, I didn't give you much chance to talk today, but do you have some closing remarks?
I was just gonna kind of echo what you just said, Karl, and especially just a big thanks and shout out to our chair and all of our subcommittee chairs and co-chairs, because sometimes this overlaps a bit with their day job, but they don't have to do this. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and it's a real contribution to the overall community. So it's been a pleasure to work with all of you guys. Looking forward to working with you in the future. But I know, just from my perspective, I really appreciate everything that you guys are all doing for our community and to develop these opportunities. So that's all I had to add.
Thanks, David. Jennifer, some closing remarks?
Just thank you. I really get a lot out of this group, both in the subcommittee and the larger committee. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to help wherever I can.
Thanks, Jennifer. Diane, I won't use any DC Comics references. We'll give you some closing remarks.
I just wanted to say thank you. I also want to make it just a couple quick points if I can, that we really, it's beyond research. We really are working and refocusing our area to scale up. The answer for business is to be able to scale up, to meet X Energy's needs, to meet our region's needs. We want to scale up. I'd also just like to thank my co-chair, Jason, AKA Robin. He's always just gives me so much great perspective. He supports so much on the state level as well as the federal level. He entertains and all of you, thank you for supporting my vision for Space Force eventually and research in that area as well, because we can do it. We've always wanted to say that we could power this region and this community on sustainable power sources. And honestly, I believe that this team and this group of collaborators and partners is really getting us one step closer to that. So thank you again for the opportunity. And I'd like to thank my port team as well for all of their support as I sit in a lot of Zoom meetings. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Jason, closing remarks.
I can't say anything better than Diane just did. So always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Good to see you again, Karl, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Jason. And the mugs in the work.
Thanks.
George, some closing remarks.
Well, I'd like to use my last minute here or so just to thank Eric Smith. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up his incredibly important role here. He leads a similar subcommittee under the MyTri effort on energy storage, and he and I have been working together very closely with the two subcommittees. And he has been an extraordinary resource and is working very close with us here in the MCEI. So I just wanted to call out Eric Smith and his contributions. I would be remiss if I didn't bring him up in this. And I want to thank everybody else, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, George. And Chad, some closing remarks.
Well, just saying thank you, Karl, for your leadership and support. Really, thank you for that. And again, thanks to David for his great efforts.
You bet. Well, we run over, but like I said, we could probably talk about this for 5 hours. So thanks everybody for your time this morning. Really appreciate all your work and dedication. David said it really well. This isn't your day job, so you're volunteering your efforts to help lead MCEI into the future and our community into the future. So thanks to all of you for your time and dedication. And thanks everybody for watching us on Zoom. And I'm going to be gone next week. So David's going to have a special coffee with David. Or maybe I think we're calling
it drinks with David. Yeah, it sounds a little bit more like a mimosa kind of thing rather than coffee, but I think we'll stick with coffee.
That's right. And David's going to talk with some of our Hanford Communities leadership. So it'll be a great session. So tune in next week. But thanks everybody again for your time. Have a great weekend and we'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Karl.